I didn't look because I wanted to. I looked because for one careless second, she wasn't my CEO. She was just a woman standing barefoot at the edge of the water, letting the tide pull at her ankles like it was asking her to stay. When she caught my stare, she didn't smile. She didn't frown. She paused. Long enough for the moment to turn heavy. Then she asked calmly, "Am I distracting you?" The ocean kept moving. I didn't. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. That silence lasted maybe a second. It felt like a confession. I'm Ethan. I'm 27. And I'm telling you this because nothing in my life had ever felt dangerous before that pause. I'm not reckless. I don't chase trouble. I work in corporate logistics, planning, numbers, quiet fixes. I'm the guy people forget the moment a meeting ends. I learned early that being unnoticed is safer. When my parents split, my father disappeared into new jobs and new towns, always promising to come back better. He never did. I decided I wouldn't want things that could leave. That Saturday, I drove to the coast because I needed quiet. No friends, no plans, just a book and the sound of water. I didn't expect to see anyone from my office, especially not her. Vivian Hale. 38. CEO. The kind of woman who could end a conversation by lowering her voice. People said she was cold. I thought she was controlled. I told myself it couldn't be her. Then she turned, the wind lifting a few loose strands from her hair, and my stomach dropped. I looked away too late. She was already walking toward me. "Ethan," she said, like she'd said it 100 times before. Of course she knew my name. I stood up too fast and nearly lost my balance. Sand stuck to my palms. She noticed. She notices everything. She stopped a few feet away. Close enough that I could smell sunscreen and salt. Not close enough to touch. "Am I distracting you?" she repeated, softer this time. I should have answered. I should have joked. I did neither. I stared at the ground like a kid who'd been caught lying. Another pause. Her eyes changed, not amused, not offended. Curious. "Is anyone sitting here?" she asked, nodding to the empty sand beside my towel. I said no before my brain caught up. She sat. The space between us felt measured, intentional. We watched the water in silence. It wasn't awkward. That scared me more. "I come here when I need to remember I'm not just that," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the city that wasn't visible. She didn't look at me when she said it. I didn't know how to answer, so I stayed quiet. I've always been good at quiet. She stood first. "Enjoy your day," she said, the professional tone sliding back into place like armor. Then she hesitated. Her eyes met mine again. "And Ethan, eyes up here." Not teasing. Not cruel. Just a line drawn. My face burned. "Yes, ma'am," I said, because it was the safest thing I knew. I told myself that was it. A strange coincidence. A story with no ending. But Monday morning proved me wrong. I stepped off the elevator on the executive floor with a folder I'd been asked to deliver, nothing important. Through the glass of her office, I saw her standing with a man I didn't recognize. He was older. Silver hair. Expensive suit that didn't try to look modern. He stood too close. Vivian's posture was perfect, but her hand tightened around a pen. A small detail. I don't know why I noticed. The man turned as I knocked. His eyes moved from my badge to my face like he was filing me away. He smiled. "There you are," he said. "Not my name. Just that." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Blocked. Vivian didn't look at me. The man did. And in that moment, I understood something without knowing why. The beach hadn't been a beginning. It had been a warning. I realized something was wrong when I caught myself checking my reflection in the elevator doors. Not fixing my hair. Not straightening my shirt. Just checking whether I looked guilty. My stomach felt hollow, like I'd skipped a meal I couldn't remember ordering. That's how the day started. No messages. No summons. Just my body reacting before my mind could catch up. My name is Ethan. I'm 27. And if you're listening to this thinking, why should I care? It's because this is the part of the story where I could still pretend I was a good guy. The part before I chose comfort over character. I work in corporate logistics. Quiet job. Clean numbers. No drama. I've spent my adult life believing that if you stay useful and invisible, you won't get hurt. Monday after the beach, I came in early again. Too early. The office lights were still harsh, unfinished. I told myself I liked the quiet. The truth is, I wanted control. I wanted to see her before she decided what I was to her now.
I didn't.
Vivian passed me in the corridor outside the conference rooms, walking fast, phone at her ear.
She didn't slow down. She didn't nod.
She didn't even pretend not to see me. Her shoulder brushed past mine, light, accidental, and my skin reacted like it had been touched on purpose. I stood there holding a tablet, my pulse suddenly loud, my throat tight for no reason I was ready to admit. I told myself it meant nothing. I told myself she was busy. I told myself I was imagining things because the beach had messed with my head. An hour later, during a meeting I had no business speaking in, her pen rolled off the table and stopped at my shoe. I bent to pick it up. When I handed it back, our fingers didn't touch, but I felt the space where they almost did. Her hand shook.
Just once.
Then she closed her fingers around the pen like she'd snapped a door shut. "Thank you," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear.
Professional. Final.
That word settled in my chest like a warning label. I buried myself in work after that. Answered emails instantly. Fixed things no one had asked me to fix. I avoided looking toward the executive floor. I told myself I was being respectful. That I was doing the mature thing. That was a lie. I was scared. That's when I saw him again. He stood near the executive elevators like he'd always been there, silver hair, suit that looked older than fashion, but richer than trend. He watched people without blinking. When his eyes found me, his smile came easy, too easy. "There you are," he said, like we'd unfinished business. My body stiffened before my mind responded.
"Yes,"
I said, immediately regretting how small it sounded. "Richard Klein," he said, offering his hand. His grip was firm, practiced, familiar in a way that suggested he didn't ask for permission often.
"You're efficient.
Vivian appreciates that." Hearing her name from him tightened something in my chest. "I just do my job." "That's exactly my point," he said, stepping a little closer. "Not enough to alarm anyone. Enough to make it feel intentional. People who do their jobs well tend to notice things." I glanced, without meaning to, toward Vivian's office. The blinds were half drawn. Richard followed my eyes and smiled like he'd been waiting for that. "You ran into Vivian over the weekend, didn't you?" For a split second, I thought about telling the truth. About saying yes and letting whatever happened next happen. But then I saw my job, my quiet life, the thin safety net I'd built. I felt my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth. So I did the easiest thing. I smiled just enough to seem cooperative and said, "I thought I saw someone who looked like her, but no." The words felt thin as they left me. Incomplete. Like I'd stepped out of alignment with myself. Richard didn't challenge me. He looked relieved. Satisfied. "Good," he said. "People misunderstand situations. They talk. Careers get complicated." He patted my shoulder, a gesture that claimed more than it comforted. "If you ever notice anything odd, people asking questions, unexpected visits, you come to me first. That's how loyalty works." I nodded. Not because I agreed. Because my body had already decided before my mind caught up. "Meet me after work," he added casually. "We'll talk somewhere quieter." He walked away like nothing had happened. I stood there, staring at the elevator numbers blinking uselessly, my hands cold. I told myself it was harmless. That I hadn't betrayed anyone. That I'd just avoided unnecessary drama. But when I finally looked toward Vivian's office again, the blinds were fully closed. And that was the moment something changed for good. Not because I'd done something dramatic. But because I'd chosen the path that lets things happen, instead of stopping them. The first time I realized I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross was when Vivian said my name, and it sounded like a question. Not angry. Not loud. Just uncertain. Like she was trying to place who I really was. I remember the exact second because my hands went cold and my throat tightened, and I still chose to keep walking. I told myself I was doing the right thing. That lie is the reason you should hear this. My name is Ethan. I'm 27. I work in corporate logistics, the quiet back end of a loud company. I'm the guy who fixes problems before most people even notice them. And if you're thinking, why would a story like this matter to me? Because it's about the kind of mistake that doesn't look like a mistake while you're making it. It looks like being helpful, responsible, loyal. Until you watch the damage spread to someone who didn't deserve it. After Richard Klein told me to meet him, somewhere quieter, I didn't sleep. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, running through every version of the next day. In some versions, I told Vivian everything and got fired. In others, I kept my mouth shut and kept my paycheck. The worst part was how easy that second option felt.
I showed up anyway.
Richard picked a cafe across the street from our building. Expensive, bright, full of people in suits pretending not to listen. He sat like he owned the table before I even arrived. When I slid into the seat, he didn't waste time. "You're smart," he said, stirring his coffee like it needed direction. "So don't make this emotional."
My jaw tightened. What is this?
"This," he said, "is protecting the company. Protecting Vivian too, whether she realizes it or not." The way he said her name made my stomach turn.
But I stayed quiet.
Silence was my bad habit.
It kept me employed. It also kept me weak. Richard leaned forward.
"Vivian is pushing a supplier change," he said.
A risky one.
"It could cost us millions if it goes wrong."
The board is nervous.
"I'm nervous." He paused, watching my face. "And I need to know what she's planning before she walks into that room and embarrasses herself." "I don't know what she's planning," I said, and it was true mostly. He smiled like he'd expected that. "Ethan, your job is to know things. You see the shipping reports.
The contracts. The timelines.
You don't have to break into her laptop." He said it like a joke, then added softly, "You just have to notice."
I should have stood up.
I should have walked out. Instead I said the sentence that ruined everything: "What exactly do you need?" Richard's eyes warmed slightly, the way a predator relaxes when the trap clicks.
There's a pre-brief document, he said.
Vivian's summary for the board. It will be printed for tomorrow's meeting. If you see it, bring it to me.
That's all. In my head, it still sounded clean. A document. A briefing. Not stealing. Not spying.
I told myself it was about saving the company. I told myself it would prevent a disaster. I told myself 100 things, because the truth was uglier. I wanted Richard to stop looking at me like I was a problem. I left the cafe feeling sick and tried to shake it off with work. I kept my head down, stayed in my lane. But around noon, an email went out to my department: executive board packets, print and assemble, urgent. My supervisor, a tired man who'd been counting down to retirement for years, waved me over.
"Ethan, you're fast," he said.
"Take these up when they're done." When the printer finally spat out the stack, my hands hovered over it like it was hot.
Board packets.
Vivian's name on the cover page. Inside, pages of numbers and summaries, her voice on paper. I could have carried the stack straight to the boardroom and been done. Instead, I did what Richard had trained me to do in 10 minutes. I noticed.
I scanned.
I looked for the pre-brief. And there it was, one page marked confidential, PRE meeting notes.
My heart thudded.
My mouth went dry. I could hear my own breathing, too loud for the hallway.
I told myself, just a glance.
Just to know if she's safe. And then I made the irreversible choice. I slipped that single page out and folded it once, small enough to hide under the rest of the packet. My hands were shaking, but my face stayed neutral. I hated how practiced I looked. I found Richard near the executive elevators like he'd been waiting. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even act nervous. He just held out his hand, palm up, like collecting something he was owed. I placed the folded page into his hand. For half a second, he didn't move. Then he smiled, quiet, satisfied, and tucked it into his jacket as if it were nothing.
"Good man," he said.
The moment the words landed, a cold wave hit me.
Not pride. Shame.
The kind that makes you want to rewind time and can't.
I turned and froze.
Vivian stood at the end of the hallway.
Not close. Not far. Just close enough.
Her eyes weren't angry.
They were flat.
Hurt in a way that didn't beg to be fixed. My body reacted before my mind.
I took one step toward her, then stopped.
Because I didn't have a story that made this okay. She walked past Richard without looking at him. That alone should have told me everything about their history. Then she stopped in front of me.
"Ethan," she said again. Same name. Different weight.
Was that for work? I tried to speak. My throat tightened like it was protecting me from myself. My eyes dropped, exactly what she told me not to do on the beach. She watched that small movement like it answered her question.
"I see," she said quietly.
And then she did the worst thing she could have done if she wanted to punish me.
She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten.
She simply turned away and walked into the boardroom, shoulders straight, like she decided she could no longer afford to trust the room, or me. I stood there in the hallway with the remaining packets in my hands, hearing the boardroom door close. And for the first time in my life, I understood what real damage feels like.
Not a shout. Not a breakup.
Just a door shutting softly, because you gave someone a reason to close it. The coldest moment wasn't when Vivian stopped speaking to me. It was when she spoke to me like I was furniture, useful, silent, replaceable.
She didn't accuse me. She didn't humiliate me.
She did something worse. She treated me like I had already been filed away. And the part that still makes my stomach twist is this. Richard Klein smiled the entire time, like he just watched a door close exactly the way he planned.
My name is Ethan. I'm 27.
I work in corporate logistics, the invisible artery of a company that pretends it runs on vision. I'm telling you this because I used to think consequences were loud, fights, firings, slammed doors. I learned they can be quiet.
They can be polite.
They can be a calendar invite with no explanation. The morning after the board meeting, I got one of those invites. Subject, process review.
No agenda. No meeting room.
Just Vivian Hale and Richard Klein listed as required attendees. My hands shook when I clicked accept. I told myself it might be a chance to explain.
A chance to fix it.
That was my last comfortable lie. When I stepped onto the executive floor, it felt different. Not physically, same carpet, same glass walls, but socially, like I'd crossed into a place where I no longer belonged. People who used to nod at me looked past me. A receptionist who always smiled at everyone didn't meet my eyes. It was as if a message had gone out. Do not attach yourself to this man. Vivian's assistant led me into a small conference room.
The blinds were closed.
The air smelled faintly of printer paper and cold coffee. Vivian was already there, seated at the head of the table. Richard sat to her right, relaxed, almost bored. Vivian didn't look up when I entered. Sit, Richard said, not unkindly.
Like a teacher. Like an owner. I sat.
My mouth was dry, but my brain kept offering stupid lines like I can explain, and it wasn't what it looked like.
I didn't say them.
I waited for Vivian to meet my eyes.
She didn't.
Richard opened a folder and slid a document toward me. It was a copy of the page I'd handed him, my own quiet betrayal printed cleanly, with timestamps and access logs attached. We're doing a routine review, Richard said.
Nothing personal.
Vivian's pen tapped once against the table.
One sharp sound. Then nothing.
Richard continued, a confidential page went missing from a packet yesterday. It was later recovered. He looked at me like he was watching weather. Care to explain? I turned toward Vivian, desperate for a sign, any sign, that she still saw me as human. She stared at the folder in front of her as if it contained the only safe thing in the room.
My voice cracked. I swallowed.
I didn't think. That, Vivian said finally, calmly, is the problem.
2 words.
No anger.
No volume.
Just a verdict. Richard leaned back. Vivian believes in accountability, he said, smiling slightly, as if he admired her. I do too. Vivian lifted her eyes to mine for the first time. And what I saw there wasn't hatred.
It was distance.
The kind you put between yourself and a stove after you've been burned. What did you give him? She asked.
My throat tightened.
The honest answer would have been, I gave him permission. But I couldn't say that without admitting the kind of cowardice that stains you. I thought it was about protecting the company, I said. It sounded weak even as I said it. Vivian held my gaze for a beat longer than necessary.
Then she looked away.
Not to punish me, worse.
To detach.
Richard sighed, as if bored by my remorse. We can't have sensitive information handled casually, he said. It creates risk.
Legal risk.
Reputational risk.
Vivian's jaw tightened.
Yes, she said quietly. Richard slid another paper across the table.
A transfer, he said.
Effective immediately. Ethan will be moved off executive materials and reassigned to warehouse operations for 90 days. Supervised access only. The words hit like a slap. Not because the warehouse was beneath me.
Because it was exile. A message.
A clean way to bury someone without firing them.
I looked at Vivian again.
My eyes were begging without permission. She didn't argue.
She didn't defend me.
She didn't even soften it. She simply nodded, once, like she was signing away a part of herself to survive. That's when I understood the true consequence. It wasn't just me being punished. It was her being forced to show the room, especially Richard, that she could cut ties cleanly. The meeting ended the way funerals do, quietly, efficiently, with people already thinking about what comes next. As I stood to leave, Vivian spoke again, still not looking directly at me. Ethan, she said, her voice low.
Do your job.
And don't come to my office.
It wasn't cruelty.
It was a boundary so firm it felt like a wall. I walked out carrying nothing but that sentence. In the hallway, I caught my reflection in the glass. Same face, same badge, same shirt, but I didn't recognize the man inside it. Richard passed behind me smiling and whispered almost kindly, "This is how grown-up worlds work." My phone buzzed as the elevator doors closed. A text from my supervisor downstairs. "Warehouse starts today.
Clock in at 2 o'clock. 2 hours.
That's how fast a life can shrink.
And the worst part?
The one person I wanted to apologize to had already gone cold enough to survive me. The last time I saw Vivian Hale as my CEO, she didn't fire me.
She didn't raise her voice.
She didn't even look angry. She looked tired, like she'd been carrying the weight of other people's choices for too long, and my mistake was simply the one that made it impossible to keep pretending she could hold it all. The part that still keeps me up is this: she didn't punish me to hurt me. She punished me because she had to survive.
My name is Ethan. I'm 27.
I used to believe a clean life came from clean decisions. Do your job, stay quiet, don't make waves. I'm telling you this because I learned the truth the hard way: you can ruin something real without ever meaning to. All it takes is one moment of fear, one small lie, one folded page. And then you spend the rest of your life trying to become the kind of man who wouldn't do it again. After the transfer, my world shrank. The warehouse wasn't cruel.
It was honest.
Concrete floors, fluorescent lights, the hum of conveyor belts that didn't care who you were yesterday. The guys down there didn't gossip about executive politics. They just worked. In a strange way, it was the first place I'd been in months where no one watched me to see what side I was on. But the quiet didn't heal me. It just gave my thoughts room to get louder. For weeks, I replayed that hallway.
Vivian's eyes.
My own eyes dropping. Richard's hand open like a demand. I practiced apologies in my head that I knew I would never get to say. I told myself that if I did my 90 days without complaint, maybe the stain would fade. That was another lie. Some stains don't fade. They just teach you what you are. Then, one afternoon, about 6 months later, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. A single text: "If you have 5 minutes, meet me where you first saw me."
No name. No signature. Just that. My hands went numb.
For a second I thought it was Richard, playing with me. But Richard never asked. He ordered. Vivian had asked once on the beach, "Am I distracting you?" This felt like the same kind of question. Quiet, dangerous. I drove to the coast after work with my heart pounding like I was doing something illegal. The sun was low, turning the water into dull metal. The parking lot was half empty. My stomach twisted as I walked toward the sand, expecting to feel foolish.
Then I saw her.
Vivian stood near the tide line, dressed simply, no entourage, no phone pressed to her ear, no armor in her posture. Her hair was down, moved by the wind.
She looked thinner.
Not weak, just worn, like someone who'd been fighting quietly for too long. I stopped a few steps away, unsure whether I was allowed to exist in her space.
She didn't smile. She didn't frown.
She looked at me the way people look at something they've lost and aren't sure they should pick up again.
"You came," she said.
"Yes," I answered. My voice sounded small in the open air.
A long pause stretched between us.
The ocean did its steady work, and neither of us moved. I wanted to fill the silence with explanation.
I didn't.
I'd learned that talking can be another way of hiding. Vivian's gaze flicked to my hands, then back to my face.
"Do you still work there?" she asked. "No," I said.
I left after the 90 days. That was the first hook I hadn't planned to reveal. It landed between us like a stone. She nodded once, as if she'd expected it. Why? Because I couldn't breathe in that building. Because every hallway felt like a verdict. Because I didn't trust myself around fear anymore. I didn't say all that. I said the only honest thing. Because I didn't deserve to stay, I said. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, evaluation. "Do you want to tell me what you told yourself that day?" she asked.
My throat tightened.
This was the moment I'd imagined 1,000 times, and none of my rehearsed lines fit. The wind pushed at my jacket. I stared at the sand, then forced myself to look up, eyes up here. "I told myself I was helping," I said. "I told myself it was about the company. The truth is, I was scared. And I wanted the pressure to stop." She held my gaze. The silence returned, heavier now. Then she exhaled, slow, controlled. "Richard wanted you to be afraid," she said. "That's how he recruits loyalty." I flinched at her saying it out loud, because it confirmed what I'd tried not to see. "What happened to him?" I asked.
Her mouth tightened. He's still there, she said.
Not as powerful as he was.
But still there.
That was the truth of grown-up worlds. The wrong people don't always vanish. Sometimes they just lose a little territory. Vivian looked out at the water. I didn't ask you here to forgive you, she said. And I didn't ask you here to punish you. I waited, feeling my pulse in my fingertips. I asked you here because I needed to know whether that's who you are, she continued, voice low. Or whether that was who you were under pressure.
My chest tightened.
There was no way to prove it with words.
Words were cheap.
Words were what I'd used to protect myself. I don't know who I am yet, I admitted. But I know who I don't want to be. Vivian turned back to me. For the first time, her expression softened, not into warmth, not into romance, into something tired and human. That's not an apology, she said.
I know, I answered.
It's just the truth.
Another pause.
Then she nodded slightly, as if accepting that truth was the only safe currency left between us. I can't go back, she said. I'm not asking you to, I replied.
The wind shifted.
A gull cried somewhere behind us. 6 months ago, that sound would have felt like an excuse. Now it just felt like life continuing, indifferent. Vivian took one step closer.
Not close enough to touch.
Close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, earned honestly. If we do anything, she said, it will be slow. My throat tightened again, but this time it wasn't fear.
It should be, I said.
She studied me for a moment, then looked away first, not cold, just careful. Take care of yourself, Ethan, she said. The sentence wasn't a promise. It wasn't a goodbye. It was something in between. As she walked back up the beach, I didn't follow.
I didn't reach for her.
I didn't try to make it a movie ending. I stood there and let the distance exist, because distance was the price of what I'd done. And as the sun dropped lower, I understood something I wish I'd known earlier. Real love isn't the part where someone chooses you. Real love is the part where you finally choose to become worthy of being chosen, whether it happens or not.